Hello. I found that it's actually a lot easier for me to record when I'm waiting in the parking lot. So now I understand why so many people seem to be recording from inside their cars. Even though I have a pretty good space where I'm able to record from at home, I don't know, there's just something about being outside in the car, I guess. So I actually wanted to talk about tarot specifically, but this can really apply to any kind of spiritual type work, healing sessions, cleansing, whatever you want to call it. And I want to talk about the ethical sessions or ethical readings and what that means, at least for me in my practice, because I've had a handful of conversations recently. A couple of them have been through like podcasts or something like that, and I feel like I get a pretty typical response or question of like, oh, like I haven't heard anyone talk about it in this way. And I think it's something that I was really appreciative of when I took my certification program with Biddy Tarot, is that they did have a pretty solid section on ethics. So that's why when I do my sessions, I have a code of ethics that I follow. Going beyond that, one of the things that Biddy Tarot really taught was like how to, again, more specifically to tarot, talk about empowering the person. You might see, if you're browsing around, like there's so many people who are talking about, I think love and relationships is a really common one. And this is like no shade to anyone, but typically I think those who are really focused on the relationship ones have a lot of healing to do, as far as like seeking someone outside of them to fill certain gaps or like areas that they feel lacking. They're trying to like have somebody fill that, and it doesn't really work that way. But in my experience, I feel like there tends to be a lot more of like self-esteem associated with like love readings. And when it comes to career and money, I feel like those might be a little bit, and of course I'm generalizing, but I feel like those might be a little bit more to do with like sense of value, which is kind of like a nuanced difference than self-esteem. So like value and also like sense of purpose. When we talk about ethical sessions and how I do my tarot sessions, I encourage folks to read my preparation guide that kind of gives a few tips on how to ask empowering questions. And because there are so many readers and you really don't need to have qualifications, are available online. And obviously I'm not talking about the scammers, but people who, well, I guess that's kind of a hard thing to say. Like if somebody is not necessarily reading ethically and they're just doing it to make money, that could still be seen as a scam. And maybe what I can say is like the impersonation scammers are like a separate thing. So that's what I was referring to first. Even though this isn't necessarily always bad, and there are ethical readers who will do this, and so there's nothing inherently, or like it's not a black and white, like this is just wrong, but like yes or no questions, fortune telling, trying to guarantee when someone's going to meet somebody, those ones can be very disempowering. Maybe there's a time and a place for people who do need that to some extent, but how I might approach it if someone were to ask me, for example, like, well, I think now I don't think I even like attract that many people in that sense anymore. But I also think that there's a need for me to kind of explain what differentiates me from other readers and other healers. Is like if somebody were to say, when am I going to meet the person I'm going to marry, for example, things that I might, and again, this also has to do with like what comes up intuitively, what cards I pull, but it might go along the lines of like, okay, let's take a step back and let's pull some cards on what you feel is missing in your life that is causing you to ask this question. And then we'll start to uncover certain things. And so in my way of serving my client, I am meant to be like the advisor. And that's actually what my certification is in. It's as a tarot advisor. That I don't just say like, okay, you're asking me the question, therefore I have to answer it. It's gonna be like, do I have permission to help you form the questions with what I feel like you're actually asking energetically? And so I am kind of getting permission. Like, is it okay if I ask it this way? And so I might ask that kind of question, or I might say, depending on what comes up, it could be like, what past experience might be preventing you from meeting your, next partner, or what might be holding you back from a new relationship. And then we'll kind of explore. So sometimes it can be like there's some healing to do in past relationships. Maybe it could do with like their energy levels. Maybe it has to do with like the ability to develop their own identity outside of somebody else first. So it can go in a number of ways, but I hope you can kind of see the difference there. And just like, when am I going to meet my next partner? And I'm trying to like, give a guess, I guess you can say, because like things are constantly changing. And that's why a lot of more ethical or conscious minded readers won't actually give timelines, or they will make it very clear that that's like, in that moment, this is what the timeline looks like, but that doesn't mean it's like guaranteed. I know there are some psychics that can do that, and so I'm just kind of differentiating a little bit more from like psychic mediums and types of energy work. And so like for myself, I'm an intuitive healer. I guess you can kind of say I'm like, I have psychic abilities, but a lot of misconceptions are that all psychics have to be mediums, but psychic abilities is actually separate than mediumship and actually so-called communicating with the other side. And so for myself, even though you could say that I'm technically in some way communicating with like the universe or my angels or my guides or what have you, my ancestors, I'm not necessarily like seeing a person or like feeling a specific presence. I'm not, specifically having a conversation with a being that I like might know their name or have some kind of clairvoyance around like what they look like and things like that. So for me, it's kind of more of like a general connection that I'm building, and I don't necessarily have a specific entity that I am communicating with. I think the point in talking about this is like, be careful with who you book sessions with. Try to do a little bit more of your research to like fill them out, engage with your intuition. If they feel right for you, don't take everything that they say as like the ultimate truth. Like, it's still the most important indicator for you will always be your own personal intuition. And so even something that I might say, that could all be information. I mean, from my perspective as a healer, when something doesn't make sense to someone, in some ways it could be that I'm misinterpreting something, but more often than not, it's just that I haven't been able to communicate the thing in the exact way for them to understand what I'm talking about yet. So that's where the exploration phase kind of helps a lot. And then I'm usually able to get to the source of it, or like they're able to understand what I'm referring to. Some people are a little bit more open than others. Some have some subconscious blocks that can be a little bit challenging to work through. But more often than not, when they're coming in and when they have a certain intention of why they're booking with me, that can really help open up their energy so that the messages for me will also be a lot clearer, so that when I'm communicating it, it will make a lot more sense to them. So no two sessions are alike. Depending on the person, I do communicate more accordingly to how they might be the most receptive. And yeah, so a lot of these things are very nuanced. A lot of these things are like very specific to the type of sessions that I do and the type of energy work that I do. A lot of mine tends to kind of ride that gray line of more subconscious things, or it can just be things that are actually, they might be aware of, but they just haven't made the connections, or like they needed a little bit of help to like connect all the dots to like, oh, okay, this situation and this situation, they're actually connected. So a lot of the work that I do in my tarot sessions, I feel like it does require some level of like, the person has already done a little bit of work, or they've kind of like, they're very open. They don't have as much resistance. It's more like they just feel a little bit stuck, like they've exhausted all of their other options and they kind of need someone to help them put all the pieces together. Which, funny enough, I'm kind of just thinking of Symphonic Alignment and how that's my tagline, helping people align all the fragments so they can see their soul's masterpiece come to life. That just like popped into my head right now, so that was kind of fun. But yeah, so like ethical readers are really, really important, and I don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing to question whether or not the person that you're booking a session with has some form of code of ethics. And yeah, so just wanted to share. It is a thing. It should be more of a thing. I don't know how they would ever regulate this industry, but there are organizations who are attempting to do that. But again, in this world, it's really hard to differentiate as well, because if you don't have the financial resources, you might be qualified in a lot of aspects, but it may be challenging because all of these programs like to charge you to prove that you're certified, which there are pros and cons to that. I just think that like a lot of under-resourced communities, less resourced communities, it can be a little bit more challenging because they don't always have the resources to like prove that they are certified or qualified. And so that's where there's a lot of people who end up kind of not maybe being always in the best interest, or maybe they don't have the same level of experience, but they can afford these certifications. So find yourself some ethical readers, and if my energy aligns with you, then please book a session with me. I also do free, or I don't like to say just free, but complimentary intro sessions, because I think if you should have the ability to kind of do a short call before working with a therapist, before working with a coach, I don't see why you shouldn't be able to test out whether a healer is an energetic match for you either. So even if the session is really only for one question, you can get quite a bit out of that. And yeah, a lot of times the work isn't even within the session. It's just that I'm meant to kind of disrupt and plant the seeds for you. And really the energetic shift happens after the session for weeks and sometimes months to come. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions, and I hope to see some of you soon.